There's been a little bit of conversation had over the past couple of weeks about the Norris Trophy. And I want to get your take because the other name in this race who's kind of come out of nowhere over the past month, he's put up a crap ton of points. Makar versus Josi. Where do you stand on that conversation? And is it even a conversation we should be having for that matter?
You know, I think a lot of people will agree with me that it's not a conversation that we
Yeah.
should be having. However, the name that I'm going to give is probably something a lot of people would disagree with. I think Makar wins the Norris Trophy this year, or deserves to win the Norris Trophy this year without question. I know a lot of people will get angry at that take because they think Roman Josi is an absolute lock. But man, one of my buddies alluded to this a couple nights ago when we were having a conversation, and we see this time and time again in the NHL where when you have guys that are having huge years like Josi is having now, we'll often gloss over a crazy season that a player who does it consistently day in and day out, like Makar, is having. And I think we're doing it again this year. I know Josi is having one of the best years of his career, but when we break this down like we will pretty soon, Makar is right there. I just think a lot of people are underrating him right now because they've just been so used to seeing him do this since his rookie year.
That's a problem with a lot of other sports too. Like even thinking basketball, I don't know how LeBron James didn't win every MVP in his prime, but he didn't. And that's because when there's a guy who comes out of nowhere and has a comparable season, he stands out, so they give it to him. I think that's a fair point. It happens in sports all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree. So let's break this down a little bit. First of all, offensively, I mean, guys, take a look at the stats. Cale Makar is not very far off Roman Josi in points. It's much narrower than it seems. Right now, we're filming on Thursday. Cale Makar has 61 games played, 24 goals, 49 assists, and 73 points, compared to a Roman Josi, 18 goals, 61 assists, and 79 points. Cale Makar, in 2 less games played, has only 4 less points. I mean, if they played the same number of games, they'd probably be virtually even, but it seems like on every sports channel that you turn on, they give this narrative that Roman Josi is destroying Cale Makar in points, and it's just clearly not true. As we break it down a little bit more, Makar is projected to have 99 points on the year, whereas Roman Josi is projected at 104, which is, on a side note, insane to see 2 defensemen putting up 100 points.
Yeah, it is.
Right? There's a big narrative offensively that Cale Makar relies on the power play, on that star-studded power play to get points, and as we'll see, it's just not true. Cale Makar puts up about 37% of his points on the power play next to Roman Josi's 44%. Makar is just more clearly a purebred scorer, whereas Josi is more so a distributor, and maybe that gets a little more flash defensively because people often like to see defensemen being distributors.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he has 24 goals right now.
Cale Makar is currently at 24, yep.
If he puts up 30, that's more than 95% of forwards in the league. It'll probably be around that number. That's insane.
Which he's on pace to do, by the way.
He is, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I don't know when the last time a defenseman put up 30 goals. Like 30 goals, we're talking. Mitch Marner might put up 30 goals this year, and we're talking. Well, that's a big number. But for a defenseman, that's next level good.
Who do you think is better offensively?
I think it's tough because I think objectively Makar is maybe like the better player, and if I needed a guy for a 7-game series tomorrow, I'd probably pick Makar. I think Josi has been maybe a little bit underrated his whole career because he's from Switzerland and he plays in Nashville, one underrated country and an underrated market in terms of national coverage. So I think when he has a season like this, it catches everyone's attention and forces them to talk about him. So he's been getting the respect he probably deserved over his whole career. But I'd have a tough time maybe handing him the Norris, especially because I think he's put up a crazy percentage of his points in the last month and a half, give or take. And so his projected points of 104 is probably inflated by that. But if he keeps this up, we know that voting is often swayed by points and not by the stats that you just mentioned, which is the way they should be assessed. But quite frankly, we all know they're not. So do I think he should win it? I probably think Makar should win it. But if he cracks 100 points, I wouldn't be shocked if Josi won it.
Yeah, no, I can see that as well. But remember, offense is only one side of it. So now let's move into the defensive
Yeah.
argument against Cale Makar and Roman Josi. So we know that Cale Makar is better offensively. But what's crazy is that although Cale Makar is touted as this unbelievable offensive defenseman, defensively, he absolutely destroys Roman Josi. Defensively is where things change, and it's something that when I was researching for this episode blew my mind because I always thought of Cale Makar as that offensive defenseman that couldn't play defense, but
Yeah.
little did I know I was wrong. The stats by the Athletic show that Makar is in the 90th to 100th percentile in all defensive metrics, while Josi lags behind in between the 70th and 90th percentile. One really important stat for a defenseman is Corsi. You mentioned that a little bit, Corsi for versus Corsi against. Do you want to just explain to everyone really quickly what those stats mean again before I get into it?
Yeah, so Corsi is just a fancy word for shot attempts.
Mm-hmm.
So Corsi for when you're on the ice, how many shot attempts does your team have against the other team? And Corsi against is how many shot attempts does the opposing team have when you're on the ice? And there's a stat, Corsi for percentage, which is essentially the ratio between Corsi for and Corsi against. So if you have a Corsi for percentage above 50%, it means when you're on the ice, your team is essentially controlling play, having more shots for than against.
Which is all the more important for a defenseman considering that they're trying to stop the puck from going in the net.
Yeah.
Right. So exactly. So when we see this, Cale Makar leads Roman Josi in every major defensive category for advanced stats. In Corsi for percentage, like you just mentioned, in expected goals for percentage, in high danger chances, which means he's giving up less of those when he's on the ice.
Mm-hmm.
All of those go to Makar by quite a bit. Cale Makar is even better on the penalty kill as well. Even though there's a larger sample size with Cale Makar on the penalty kill because Roman Josi takes way more penalties, his Corsi for percentage and expected goals percentage on the penalty kill is so much higher than Roman Josi's. It's just crazy to see that Cale Makar's unbelievable offensive ability almost masks his ability to play defense as well. And that is something really scary. After I understand these stats now, I would not be surprised if Cale Makar stays healthy his whole career. He could end up with like 5 or 6 Norris trophies.
He probably should.
Yep.
He's in his early 20s, and he's probably already the best defenseman in the league. This year, he'll hopefully get his due. But just before we move on from this conversation, because we know how weird NHL trophy voting is, if Josi actually hits 100 points, he will probably be in the Hart conversation. And we've just had a discussion about how Makar is objectively better than Roman Josi. But I 100% see a world where Roman Josi is nominated and possibly wins the Hart, and Makar gets no conversation, no Hart Trophy conversation. That's just because voting is so odd, but also maybe because of the way the Hart Trophy is defined. And maybe to his team, Josi might be viewed as more valuable because the team around him, and especially the defensemen around him, are not the best. He doesn't have, and granted, maybe Devontae is just having the year he's having, partially because he's playing with Cale Makar, but Josi doesn't have that comparable defenseman or defensive core or even the forwards in front of him. So I can see a world where Josi hits 100 points and gets nominated for a Hart, and Makar probably just wins the Norris and doesn't even get Hart conversation. When realistically, he's like one of the top 5 players in the league and probably should be in the Hart conversation, but that's just voting for you.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely see a world where Roman Josi wins the Hart without winning the Norris Trophy. And I think by definition of what the Hart Trophy means, that's perfectly valid. And I think that this is a good example of that. We talk a lot about how the Hart Trophy should be given to the most valuable player on their team, which doesn't mean that they have to be the most valuable player in the league, right? Cale Makar can be the better defenseman and win the Norris, while Roman Josi is far more important to his team. And I would argue in favor of that. If you take Roman Josi off of Nashville, that team's power play falls off of a cliff. Their offensive production falls off of a cliff. Whereas if you take Makar off of Colorado, we saw it for a while this year. They were just fine without him.
Yeah.
That power play was still really good. Devon knows how to anchor that power play one without him. You know what? A part of me really hopes that Cale Makar wins the Norris and Roman Josi wins the Hart, just so we can finally get these voters to understand what these trophies mean. Yeah,
and it's not even just the voters. I think the voters have been inconsistent in the past, but it's also fans always get upset when the Hart Trophy winner is. I remember when Taylor Hall won it, people were saying McDavid should have won it, but based on the definition of the trophy, like that year he probably deserved to win it because we've seen now, without a prime Taylor Hall, New Jersey has been in the dumps ever since he left. And that team, if anything, has gotten better players since then. But we can talk about that in the summer a little bit when it comes time for the trophy presentations.